When done correctly, a babyface turn can be one of the most satisfying things in all professional wrestling. But there's a reason that wrestling is often referred to as an art and not a science. Whether it's a blatant emergency stopgap due to an injury or a firing, or doesn't mean as much due to too many turns, or just because some wrestlers are flat out better as heels, there are times when a face turn just doesn't stick. There are plenty of examples of this spanning decades and companies, but there are some that simply stand out above all else. And this week, I'm gonna rank them the top 8 worst face turns of all time. Number 8, Ken Patera. In the late 70s and early 80s, former Olympic powerlifter Ken Patera was sort of the Kurt Angle of his time, boasting about his superior athletic prowess as he intimidated babyfaces across the country. But the former Intercontinental Champion's biggest run came to an end in April of '84, when he and Mr. Saito were arrested for throwing a rock through the window of a McDonald's in Wisconsin, then fighting off the police when they came to investigate. Patera served 2 years in prison for the crime. Upon Ken's release from prison in 1987, Vince McMahon decided to recast him as an embittered good guy, seeking revenge against his former manager Bobby Heenan. Patera's grudge came from the fact that the Brain never visited him in prison, a shaky motivation at best. He also complained endlessly about Heenan selling him up the river, which came off like he was passing the buck and not taking any accountability for his actions. Dude, it wasn't Heenan's fault that you got mad because the McDonald's was closed that night. The two faced off in a debate, ending with Patera damn near breaking Bobby's neck for committing the heinous crime of verbally outclassing him in front of a live audience. What a good guy. Despite him being a member of Hulk Hogan's Survivor Series team that year, fans had a hard time getting behind Babyface Ken, and he was moved to an enhancement role before leaving the company in the summer of '88. Number 7, Doink the Clown. Let's face it, clowns can be pretty creepy. While not everyone has a fear of clowns, the idea of that fear has been around forever. It's popped up in the mainstream time and time again in every form of media, so it was only a matter of time before it found its way into professional wrestling.
Because when I'm through with them, that red streak will probably turn yellow.
Doink the Clown made his in-ring debut in early 1993, a miserable, sadistic character who got his giggles at the expense of others, making the kids cry and knocking people down with tripwire. Matt Bourne's maniacal interpretation of the character was seen by many as one of the few bright spots in the Federation at the time, so it only makes sense they'd kill that bright beacon of hope before it picked up too much steam. That fall, Doink upset Jerry Lawler by failing to take down Bret Hart, so the Clown Prince of the WWF directed his ire toward the King in retaliation. Henceforth, his pranks were used for good, not for evil, and he worked to make kids laugh instead of freak out. He even had a kid-friendly sidekick named Dink. But the biggest disappointment of all? He started calling himself the Doinkster. Ugh.
Just 2 weeks away to Royal Rumble. Boy, that thing's turning Doinkster. We can't wait. Huh, little buddy? He's gonna...
By this point, Bourne had been fired from the company due to recurring drug issues, meaning the wig and face paint bounced around between several other wrestlers for years. Not only was the character neutered by the very nature of the face turn, every other wrestler to take on the role afterward was simply doing a pastiche of what somebody else had already done better. Instead of a unique, chilling heel, Doink became a cheesy, pandering good guy, making it harder for anyone over the age of 10 to get behind him than it already was. Well, thank God Alabama Doink fixed that problem. Number 6, Owen Hart. The wrestling world was rocked after the Montreal Screwjob in 1997, but except for the Screw-E, perhaps no one's career was upended as much as Owen Hart's. When Jim Neidhart and the British Bulldog left for WCW with Bret, Owen chose to stay with the WWF, lured back into the fold by promises of a title program with Shawn Michaels.
I am telling you exactly what I am going to do, and that is make Shawn Michaels' life a living hell.
Things started off well enough as Owen suddenly had an angrier edge about him. His character, a well-done blur between what was real life and what was a work. The fans believed in this character and wanted to see him succeed. To their credit, the beginning of this run for Owen worked remarkably well. It was just the middle and the end that needed improvement. Owen's title match resulted in a DQ when European champion Triple H interfered, shifting Hart's focus from Shawn to Hunter. Owen would win the European title by beating the artist formerly known as Goldust dressed up as Triple H because Hunter was out with a knee injury. Such a noble babyface move. Despite this, Hart was never able to exact revenge on the actual DX members who tormented his family for months and drove them from the promotion. Remember that badass, foul-mouthed character we saw back in December? Well, that guy left in a hurry. I'm no detective, but I wonder if a certain top star who wasn't a huge fan of Owens at the time might have felt the new gimmick leaned a bit toward the infringement side of things and spoke up about it. Just asking questions. Now as a white meat babyface, Owen was outsmarted by DX at almost every turn for months. If there's one thing worse than a babyface who loses all the time, it's a babyface babyface who loses and is also a dummy. To make matters worse, DX got over as good guys because of this feud. Owens' failed babyface run before joining the Nation squandered just about any equity or leverage he may have had after the screwjob, as the two biggest stars in the company seemingly wanted nothing to do with him in the ring. But whether it was politics or just bad luck, Owens' last time as a good guy ranks up there as one of the worst. Number 5. Stone Cold Steve Austin. If you watched my worst heel turns video from 5 years ago, you know that I put Steve Austin's turn at WrestleMania X7 at the top of my list. Looking back now, I can recognize that his actual in-ring work held up a lot better than I remember. More than anything, the worst thing about that heel turn was the timing of it, as The Rock was on his way out the door and the Federation was in dire need of a hero. As one half of the two-man power trip, Austin was a brutal psychopath. His vile actions against the Hardy Boys and Lita are forever burned into the memories of many fans of the time period. As a leader of the Alliance, Stone Cold was a paranoid coward who could still get overly violent if he felt his spot was being threatened. Needless to say, there was very little to like about Stone Cold this time from a character perspective.
What?
And then there's that. Right up until Survivor Series 2001, Austin was still the incorrigible, intolerable, paranoid champion we'd seen all summer, and in the end was betrayed by teammate Kurt Angle, the man who had just previously betrayed the WWF by jumping to the Alliance. It turns out Angle was a double agent for Vince McMahon all along, and in the span of 24 hours, Kurt and Vince went from being babyfaces to heels again. Considering how fans had been conditioned for months to root for the Federation, it felt like a weird about-face for Kurt and Vince to turn so suddenly. But I guess one uninspired turn deserves another.
And now there's Austin! Oh my God! Stone Cold! Look at him! He's the owner! Vince McMahon pulling!
Despite leading the charge to destroy the company for months right up until the previous night, WWF champion Steve Austin received a hero's welcome from the fans as he assaulted both Angle and McMahon. He never once apologized for his actions as a heel, nor was he ever held accountable, and neither the fans nor the people in charge of writing this stuff seem to care. They say wrestling fans have long memories, but I guess that goes out the window when it comes to guys that they like. Number 4. Randy Orton and Seth Rollins. Over the last 20 years, few pet projects in WWE have been as consistently successful as Orton and Rollins. They're both far better at getting fans to boo them than to cheer them, but two of their biggest babyface runs share another common thread. Randy Orton became a founding member of Evolution in 2002, growing and learning from Triple H and Ric Flair and teaming alongside other relative greenhorn Batista. As one of the best young cocky heels in wrestling at the time, he rapidly rose through the ranks, holding the IC title for 8 months before finally winning the world title at SummerSlam 2004. The next night, he was betrayed by Triple H. Along with Roman Reigns and Dean Ambrose, Seth Rollins is a founding member of The Shield, which debuted in 2012. The trio ran roughshod through the company before Rollins turned on the group and joined the Authority in 2014, winning Money in the Bank and cashing in at WrestleMania 31 to win the WWE title. A knee injury put an unfortunate end to his reign and froze all of his developing storylines. He returned in May of 2016, still as a lackey for the Authority, completely going against what the fans seemed to want at the time. That summer, in a match for the vacant Universal Championship, he was betrayed by Triple H. Looking back, there were two glaring problems with both of these face turns. The timing wasn't right, and their motives were weak at best. WWE completely rushed Orton's ousting from Evolution, as he hadn't developed any character traits the fans would have liked before the betrayal. Meanwhile, Rollins' babyface turn happened months after it would have made sense. By the time it did happen, his character was too muddled for the turn to really matter. And what was the number one reason we were supposed to like these guys now? Because Triple H wasn't their friend anymore? Sorry, but that's not gonna cut it. Orton was cut down by Helmsley the following month and would take a long time to recover, while Rollins wouldn't even get a chance at Triple H until WrestleMania. In the meantime, he lost a lot to Kevin Owens for non-Triple H reasons before finally getting his big match and earning the Kingslayer nickname. Two men with similar arcs, a similar association with Triple H, and similar revenge storylines, which were both executed pretty poorly. The only thing that makes Rollins' feud somewhat better was he actually beat Hunter in the end. Number 3. The Miz, twice. Some people are just born to be babyfaces, and God bless him, but The Miz is just not that guy. From the very beginning, through every evolution, the entire point of Mike Mizanin's wrestling character has been to antagonize, to frustrate, to annoy. He's every douchey villain in a teen comedy come to life. He's completely insufferable, which is what makes Miz so damn good at being a baddie. In that respect, he's truly one of the best. Now, if you took a great quarterback and made him play defensive tackle, it wouldn't end well, would it? Well, it's exactly what's happened every time The Miz has been taken out of his heelish comfort zone. Take, for instance, his first big babyface run that began at the end of 2012. Unhappy with the direction of CM Punk's Survivor Series team in the build-up, Miz quit and joined Team Foley instead. Following the soft release of Good Guy Miz, things turned up a notch in early 2013 when he fought for the honor of the US of A against US champion Antonio Cesaro.
You don't know the first thing about the USA. Sure, we like burgers. There is no group of people tougher and more resilient.
I saw better acting in Christmas Bounty. But that's not all. Just to put the rotten cherry on this spoiled Sunday, Miz got the on-air approval of the Nature Boy Ric Flair, who passed a figure 4 leg lock onto him. It'd be a fitting tribute if his version didn't look so terrible. This behavior lingered on for months until he was finally written off TV to go film The Marine 4, which we've established on this channel as the worst of the Marine movies. If I had to take time off to go film that piece of crap, I would have turned heel when I came back too. The Miz played the smarmy Hollywood prick to perfection until late 2018, when he began to try and buddy up with World Cup winner Shane McMahon. The Wrestling World Cup that they made up, not the soccer one. Miz appealed to Shane's softer side, arguing that becoming a tag team was the only way they could get through their respective daddy issues. The two ended up gelling as a team and would even win the SmackDown tag titles at the 2019 Royal Rumble. Upon losing the belts next month at Elimination Chamber, Shane-O snapped, beating the holy crap out of the Miz in front of Mike's own dad. Now, you would think with Miz being the sympathetic figure and the more experienced wrestler, he'd be reinvigorated after that betrayal and give Shane what for, right? Well, obviously, you've never seen Shane during his prime. From their street fight at WrestleMania 35, their cage match at Money in the Bank, and just about all their encounters in between, Miz constantly lost the part-time performer. He never got a leg up for any real period of time, letting everyone know just who the more important figure in the storyline really was. At least 2013 babyface Miz got an IC title reign to show for his efforts. Miz got nothing. Well, except for an angle where he and his family were terrorized by the Fiend, and he made his way to the ring for their match by doing the same old entrance pose like it was no big deal. In the immortal words of Scott Hall, if you're a babyface and you don't eventually win, you're fucked. And it's safe to say that Miz got the royal treatment in that regard in 2019. Number 2. Alberto Del Rio. Long before people stopped liking Alberto Del Rio as a human being, wrestling fans stopped caring much about his career in general after that bizarre time in 2012 and 2013 when the powers that be tried to mess with the formula. Del Rio, another example of a natural-born wrestling heel, had once been on the fast track to success, winning the Royal Rumble, Money in the Bank, and the WWE title in his first 18 months on television. But Burt was never the same after losing the title to CM Punk, and lost most of his major programs the following year when he wasn't nursing injuries. Finally, at TLC 2012, Del Rio turned to the light side by saving his ring announcer, Ricardo Rodriguez, from the dastardly 3MB on Miz TV. Oh yes, I forgot to mention that The Miz, the other new crap babyface, is part of this moment as well, so things are going great back then, guys. What happens next takes place 2 weeks after that last moment. I have no way to set this one up other than saying it's new babyface Alberto Del Rio hitting Santa Claus with a car. You cannot tell me that scene was not played for laughs, because I watched that clip for the first time ever this past week and I laughed my balls off. And the best part about it is, it served no purpose and was never mentioned again. Within weeks, Birdie would feud with The Big Show and become the new World Heavyweight Champion on SmackDown. The whole push felt like it came from out of nowhere, similar to the push the guy he was going to work WrestleMania with was. Former world champion Jack Swagger was now paired up with Zeb Coulter to perform a politically flavored gimmick, waging a two-man war on immigration, and seeing successful immigrant Del Rio as the source of their problems. The angle was meant to galvanize fans around Del Rio, to get them to embrace him as someone who represents the best of what America has to offer. Maybe it was because some fans felt weird cheering for such a touchy subject, maybe it was because Del Rio still wasn't all that likable yet, maybe it was that DUI by Jackie Swags just weeks before Mania, or maybe it was a combination of all three, because that angle was dead on arrival at MetLife Stadium. Alberto lost the title the very next day to Money in the Bank winner Dolph Ziggler, the most popular heel in the company at that moment. That program ended with Del Rio getting it back weeks later and turning heel again after exploiting a Ziggler concussion. Well, that was a fun experiment. Ever since Eddie Guerrero's passing, WWE's been on this seemingly endless pursuit to find their next big Latin star to court Hispanic viewers. It was generous of them to try and give Del Rio that distinction, but it never had the chance to get off the ground, not only due to bad luck, but an incompatible personality for the role. It's hard to be portrayed as an uppity aristocrat one week and then play a relatable man of the people the next. Before I present the best of the worst, here are a few honorable mentions. Bobby Roode. When Bobby Roode left Impact Wrestling to go to NXT in 2016, he picked up right where he left off. This natural heel could still wrestle circles around most of his opponents, and he received one of the most popular and singable entrance themes of the modern era. You don't even need me to play it for you. You're humming it to yourself right now. Okay, just this once. Roode was an awesome baddie as NXT champion, so when they had him jump to the main roster in the summer of 2017, they kept everything about him unchanged, except for which part of the face-heel spectrum he was sitting on. They kept the ring attire and the kick-ass theme song, just about everything, except only now he was a good guy with zero explanation. I'll never understand why they went that route when there's absolutely nothing about him to suggest he's a good guy. Bobby Roode lingered in the mid-card for ages with a forgetful run as US champion and a somewhat more memorable tag team run with Chad Gable. But besides that, any momentum he may have had at NXT vanished the moment he debuted for SmackDown. What were they thinking? So what do you think we should do with Bobby Roode? He's a great in-ring talent and one of the best heels on NXT. Well, how can he be a bad guy? His theme song is so catchy. Make him a babyface, damn it. Lacey Evans. For the bulk of her entire run on the main roster, Lacey Evans has been an unabashed heel. Literally nothing to like about her character in the least. I mean the condescension, the time where she tried to break up Becky Lynch and Seth Rollins, the nerve to spend week after week just walking out and waving and then walking to the back. What a I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit worked up over this right now. But for one brief shimmering moment at the very end of 2019, someone in WWE just said, hey, what if we just make her a babyface this week? And someone else said, okay. Suddenly the announcers made a big deal of her military service and her devotion as a mother as she challenged Bayley for the SmackDown Women's title, barely acknowledging how low her character often got and acting like it never happened. But fans had a hard time buying the act. Then the pandemic happened and suddenly there were no fans at all. After accomplishing zilch as a face, Evans went back to her heelish ways this past July, in that classic fashion, losing a terrible karaoke segment on SmackDown.
Spend my days working hard on the go.
Elias. Now don't get me wrong, here's an example of a guy who could be good as both a heel and a babyface, but we just haven't had too much of a chance to see that yet. After getting some of the biggest heel reactions week after week, eventually Elias became too cool to simply boo. Fans had gone along for the ride and were chanting "Walk with Elias" every week, and generally were appreciating the Drifter's musical stylings. The face turn was made official in October of 2018 when Elias attacked Baron Corbin, which at this point is like a rite of passage in the company. The great thing about Elias's run as a face was he didn't really have to change up his promo style at all. He was still talking trash and making diss tracks, only now they were pointed less at the fans and more toward the heels. After a long program with Bobby Lashley, suddenly without warning, Elias's time as a good guy came to an end at the Royal Rumble as he had a brief feud with new Hall of Famer Jeff Jarrett. This one's an honorable mention, not because it was bad, but because they seemed to bring it to an end far too early. And the number one worst babyface turn of all time is Kane. This is basically the same number one as my worst Kane storyline countdown from way back, and I don't even care. Nothing else comes close. The year was 2004. Kane was a big old demented psychopath after being unmasked, eventually setting his sights on Lita. In order to protect her fiancé Matt Hardy from a brutal beating, Lita gave up her body to Kane in storyline, and faster than you can say Katie Vick, Lita was kayfabe preggers with the demon seed.
It's mine.
The day we finally get Maury Povich to appear in one of these segments is the day we never see another paternity angle in wrestling again, because nothing else will top that. The rest of the angle plays out like your typical love saga. Boy meets girl, boy rapes and impregnates girl, boy forces girl into marriage, boy abuses pregnant girl, boy accidentally falls onto pregnant girl and forces a miscarriage. Seriously, classic love story. In that one moment, Kane went from being an insane, deviant rapist to caring husband and prospective father. He swore revenge on Snitsky for what he did to his unborn spawn and to his wife, who he recently called a bitch on live TV. Soon after Kane dispatched Snitsky, Lita would escape her captor and run off with Edge. Wait, I'm sorry, according to the narrative, she turned her back on her husband. What a Jezebel. Yes, in the completely fucked up world known as the WWE Universe, Kane is treated as a sympathetic babyface from the Snitsky feud onward, despite the fact that this whole storyline began when he had sex with a woman against her will and forced her to carry the baby until she suffered a violent miscarriage. I mean, the way the story is being told, somehow Lita is the heel in all this? How?
It's the magic of...
No! No! Folks, there have been some lousy babyface turns throughout history. There's the ones I mentioned here, and then there's guys like Scott Steiner, Paul Orndorff, Eric Rowan, Lex Luger, Ric Flair, Triple H, not to mention the many others I'm sure you'll add in the comment section. Those are all bad in their own unique ways. But for my money, nothing's gonna top Kane the good guy rapist as the worst babyface turn in all of wrestling. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.